Good morning, everybody. Hello, and welcome to the V2 Market webinar on transforming energy and investigating servitization model and funding prospects in the V2G space. I'm very happy to be here today with our distinguished speakers. We have Sandra Tritin, Alejandro Close, and Chiki. I'm going to present them slowly as they're going to start taking the floor one by one. And then happy to open the floor for questions and comments or suggestions, or just have a very fruitful and insightful discussion in the end of the webinar. So I'm going to start with Sandra. She's going to be the one that is going to take the floor and open this exciting webinar. So a small presentation and about Sandra. So she's having over 10 years experience in energy and IT telecommunications. She's a successful entrepreneur who has co-founded Beebop and Tiko energy solutions with companies in the area of energy flexibility aggregation. She has also worked with different businesses in the new energy industry to develop innovative models, market entry strategies, and technology choices. She's also holding different board positions, for example, Energy 360 or Junction Growth it's Investors. It's a tricky name. And also has a background in business management. So welcome, Sandra. Very excited to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for having me, and great good morning. So I will just share my screen so that you can see my slides. Since I'm the first one, I have the pleasure of making a short introduction as well to the topic. And the question here is a bit like batteries, and batteries meaning not only the normal residential storage, but also the storage that is coming with the car. Is it a hype or a necessity for the energy transition? Now, what we all know with all of our topics of digitalization, decentralization, etc., that EV and charge points are one of the fast growing distributed energy resources. And I took the freedom to pick some numbers from Delta E, and you can see here on the bottom left side the growth and annual sales with around 6 million charge point sales in 2027. So it's really a decent, great growth stage. And the good thing around this growth in the EV space is it grows even more by itself than it does with storage, heat pumps, or solar. And why? Because the car and then therefore also the charger are not only serving as a battery, what we are mostly interested in, but it's mainly serving as a transport, as a way of transport. And it's getting more and more attractive to consumers, and consumers need transport anyway. Now, with that growth, it's becoming more and more interesting to look also at the features that batteries in general, which can be a normal storage or the car battery, are bringing to the consumer. And if we look a bit on the left side around the consumer needs, they are all the same, I think, since many decades. So first of all, we are all looking for supply security. So we want to ensure that we have enough electricity at whatever point in time we need it. We are looking for price stability, so that we know roughly what we need to pay at one point in time. There's also the need for energy savings, because in some areas in Europe, but also globally, the energy prices are really peaking at different points in time. Some people are even then going further and looking for an active management of their energy consumption to overcome some of the challenges like increasing bills, or being also more independent, which is then, let's say, the top stage where consumers are really looking to drive and to control their own energy consumption. So how do batteries, either of cars or of stationary batteries, are serving? This is mainly once we look into self-consumption optimization. So once we have the consumer segment, which already has some solar installations, and brings then an electric car with a charger into the building, that gives the perfect business case for self-consumption. And normally what we see is that it can drive the self-consumption of an average of 20%, but probably also the later presenters have some additional numbers on that. So it just underlines the importance of storage within the energy transition, and also on how to manage the consumer need and match them for the future. When we look into vehicle to grid, for example, this is always, let's say, like the holy grail almost, where everyone is now looking into. It's, I think, also important to not only look at the battery itself, but also look at the charge point and at the charging process. And why? Because also even considering the charging process and optimizing it brings already quite significant advantages to the end consumer, which is around leveraging dynamic tariffs, provisioning of different kind of energy or grid services, because also charging processes can be optimized in a way that it serves additional needs, and I will come back to that in a second. And the good thing is, if we control the charging process, at least it has no impact on the asset life cycle of the battery charger. But there are also some challenges, as always, right? There is no good without some troubles behind. One is especially the data capturing and provisioning of the data, and also that the consumer, because he's using the car mainly for transport, can change his behavior quite ad hoc and quite quickly from one to the other minute. Still, both the charging process as well as the battery can serve in many different ways, and we will hear that, I think, also from the other speakers after me more in detail. But what is normally done is that you can aggregate the different kind of storage capacities or the different kind of charging processes to serve for energy or grid services. And this is getting now more and more interesting, because the price spreads, for example, on trading markets are getting much higher than they were 10 years ago. For example, with Tiko Energy Solutions, the case was difficult. It was possible, but difficult. And the case was more on grid services like ancillary services, for example. Whereas nowadays, because of these big price spreads of increasing renewable energy coming into the grid, the trading gets much more attractive, and aligning your charging process with these tariffs and with the trading profiles. How does it look like, and what needs to be considered? If you see that you can unlock quite significant value, we have to think about two layers on how the charging process or how the battery is leveraged, besides the basic feature of providing transport. On one side, we have quite some optimization going on a local level, which can be aligning the charging process with the time of use tariffs, using it for peak shaving, also leveraging the self-consumption as we have seen before, but also providing comfort in a way of there is enough electricity charged in the battery once I want to travel, but also optimizing against the asset lifetime, because we always have to keep in mind the car was bought as a reason for transport and not mainly as a reason for providing grid services. But here is the so-called multi-service layer that goes on already on site. Now, if we want to connect this kind of capacity into energy markets on the top level for system optimization, we all think about wholesale markets. Then we had already the topic around the TSO grid services, ancillary services, can be also DSO services, etc. And the challenge here is that all of these products are looking different in different kind of regulations and in different kind of areas. So there is a high need to first of all adapt the integration between the lower level and the upper level of the system, but then also to adapt the optimization of the batteries or of the charging process against the different regulations which are represented on the upper layer of the system. So this is what we call a multi-product kind of approach. So how can that look like? How would it work? And I give you the example of Beebop I'm currently working with, and I'm one of the founders with them. But it applies also to other aggregators. On one side, we have the assets and the vendors. So in this way, it's the charge point operator or the car provider. And we see already this tremendous amount of different manufacturers coming up. And even though there is some kind of standard on the interfaces, it also differentiates often in the detail. As we say, devil is in the detail included. So what is needed to really leverage this kind of capacity is to provide a so-called abstraction layer, which represents then all the different kind of assets, all different kind of brands, all different kind of models, in a way that they can be orchestrated and optimized to bring the maximum capacity for flexibility services. Now, this is done then on that middle part where you have a so-called orchestration layer. On the other side, you have the abstraction layer, then again to the monetization possibilities. And as mentioned already on the slide before, you have the different kind of grid services, you have the different kind of energy services, and they are all under different regulations. And even if you think that an intraday trading or an ancillary services should be more or less the same across Europe, there will be always a little different approach or a difference on the technical details. So also here, we need to provide an abstraction layer again to make it as easy as possible. And why? Because if you put yourself into the shoes of a trader, for example, you also need to have a high precision forecast on one side, what this kind of middleware platform provides. But also you need to rely on that precision. So if the aggregation piece in the middle provides you a forecast of 10.5 megawatt to be controlled, the trader here on the right side wants to rely on these 10.5 megawatt and doesn't want to have 11.2 or 0.8. So this is how the aggregation then can work. From the left, from the assets, through an abstraction layer, the orchestration in the middle, again through an abstraction layer to the right side to provide the different kind of grid and energy services. And we see that now going on quite a lot across Europe, especially with car batteries, but also with the charge processes. The most important part is that we need to always think from a consumer perspective. So about the consumer economics, and have in mind that there's on one side some physical constraints that we get, for example, driven by the fact that the consumer always wants to leave at 6 o'clock in the morning to go to work. But there are also financial constraints, because as an example, if we stop the charging process now and postpone it to later on, the energy and grid services and fees might be quite different, might be potentially higher. So it's important to represent that as well into that monetization part on the right side, to say, if we are marketing your charging station, your charging process, now on a market XYZ, it has to give at least a certain amount of value that it makes sense to do so, physically and financially. Now, even though that is done across Europe now increasingly more and more, there's always no value without challenges, right? And every one of you who has gone through the pain on doing vehicle to X projects knows about them pretty well. One major point that we need to keep in mind is the cybersecurity. Even though many of the manufacturers are providing different clouds to make the access to their assets really easy, this also gives a point of reliability that we need to take care of. Then there's also the question around additional information, and this is always the question also with the interaction together with the consumer, right? How do I know how much the battery is charged? I might know from the car itself, but when does the consumer want to leave? And the consumer doesn't want to go always on his app and say like, I'm leaving every day at 5 and tomorrow I leave at 6 and then I leave at 8. This can work for trials and proof of concepts, but we need to find ways to make that interaction much more easy with the end consumer. There's also initial cost for the consumer. Luckily, the costs are going down on each of the car manufacturers, right? We see that continuously. It's a bit the same path that also solar and normal residential storage took over the past years, but it's still quite high in comparison to some normal and average car models. Then we still have the continuous changing regulation and subvention schemes, right? On one side, you have, for example, in Germany, a KfW program where everyone gets a subvention for their charge point. Everyone is running within 24 hours to get a charge point installed. The subvention is taken away, and also all of a sudden the demand goes down immediately, right? So the challenge here is as well to get to try and find ways on how to get away from these subventions. Some of the new utility providers, like, for example, an 1,5 Grad or an Enpal, are going into that direction to also offer pre-financing of the hardware, including also the charge points. We are not there on the cars yet, might be an interesting case as well. And then we have the last point, and this depends probably also on the geography where you're coming from, the resilient supply chains, and especially the installation capacity. I myself have asked for installing a wall box at home. I had to wait like 4 months, and just because there was no installer having enough time to come to my home and do the work. So there we are getting into bottlenecks where we really need to optimize and make it as smooth as possible. Still, I personally think the value of charge processes and their charge points, as well as vehicle to X, is crucial for the energy transition. It's not only a hype, especially on the car batteries. I think we will see that continuous growth. There might be some hiccups here and there, also depending on where the end consumer will put their focus on in spending their money, on transport, on their homes, on leisure, on holidays, etc. But for sure, the growth will come, because if you look at the amount of cars that are around in the industry now, like normal combustion cars, they all will be replaced during the time. The question is only how fast. So I think we have everything. We have the technology. We also have the money. There is a bit of a challenge sometimes with regulation. It can be always quicker and more precise. But we also have the opportunity to find now new business models. Now I think it's on us to get everything together, put it into place, and make it happen to support in that way the energy transition. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for this very insightful presentation, Sandra. It's really been very interesting, and I already have a few questions, and I hope that the listeners are going to start populating and asking a few questions. Indeed, I think clearly the bottleneck is regulation. Europe is united from some points, yes, but from other points of view, is still very fragmented. And that gives us a perfect introduction for the next speaker, Alejandro Close. He's working for Holaluz. He's a member of the special projects team. Holaluz is a green energy provider in Spain, based in Spain. So he's going to also be able to provide us with a bit of insights in the Spanish market, and Chaba, who's going to and the presentation, the webinar with his presentation, is also going to present a bit of the barriers that we encountered in trying to dive into this space. Just a few words about Alejandro before passing the word to him. In his role, he oversees investors' relations as well, and activities related to ensuring effective communication and strategic insights for stakeholders. Additionally, he focuses on projects that drive innovation and business transformation within the company. His work encompasses Smart EV Charging R&D, EV charger integration with solar, and basically optimizing the business transformation processes within Holaluz. But I'm going to pass on the word to him, and he's going to walk us through his presentation. The word is yours, Alejandro.
Thank you, Alex. Hello, everybody. Good morning. I'm going to share with you what we've been working in the residential market in the B2 market project from the EU. I believe that we all agree with this, that the future belongs to those who see the possibilities before they become obvious. Because if we are here learning about what the future lies for decentralized energy resources, then we obviously believe it has a lot of possibilities. And even though, as Sandra was saying, we have been in a hiccup, there is also a necessity to change the current paradigm of the mobility, the mobility, and be able to decarbonize it, from changing from going to a gas pump, filling down the tank, to having in your house the ability to charge, and so you don't need to fill the battery completely every time, but just for the needs that you're going to need for mobility of the day or the time whenever you can come back home again. And also it is very related with solar energy and all the other decentralized energy resources. And for this paradigm to change, we need to provide the flexibility that the system needs in an affordable, fast, and intelligent manner, and coordinated through virtual power plants. And this would be the solar rooftops, the standalone batteries, the EV chargers, the heat pumps, and also the customers that are around these energy resources to offtake the energy for their energy, for their needs too. But to do this, we believe that we need to transform the way that we produce and consume the energy from a current status of centralized oligopolistic system to a decentralized network of democratized and affordable clean energy that will also at the same time dramatically reduce all the T&D costs because of savings in energy lost throughout the way in the transport and distribution, and also unleashing the full potential of the energy demand and the proximity grid. I'm gonna talk about Spain because this is where our core business is. The opportunity to grow distributed generation, specifically solar, is massive. Well, I say specifically solar because the graph that you're seeing here is how many available rooftops, feasible rooftops actually, are there in Spain. There are 10 million. And Spain started with this transition in 2019, like 10 or 15 years after the whole of Europe, because it had a stop, a huge halt in activity up to 2019 when the famous sun tax was eliminated. From there, it started an exponential curve from 6,000 installations in 2019, 20,000 installations in 2020, 54,000 installations in 2021, 2017 1,000 installations in 2022, and in 2023, even though we were highly impacted by the high interest rate environment and aid from the government were also disappearing, and the next generation funds were also over. We have a little hiccup, but we believe that by 2030 we would have 1,500,000 installations, and as soon as possible, when people realize how their mobility and all energy related costs could be saved, the 10 million rooftops will be executed. This is also the view from the International Energy Agency, which last year updated their forecast for 2028 by 46% in the distributed energy. It was the largest increase in all the forecasts. And they also, in their net zero by 2050 report, they also forecast that the electrification of fossil fuels would mean 3x demand in electrification. If you were to live in Spain, you would be, I think, very happy, and we would demonstrate what Sandra was saying about installing solar PV and batteries, how much savings they would mean. This is a study we did in-house for 20 years Spanish energy consumption in a typical household with this year's prices. The energy bill in the 20 years would be 84,000 euros, including mobility, heating, cooling with air conditioning, and electricity bills. If you install solar panels, you would save with self-consumption only 30% of the energy bill. Then if you add a car and maximize your rooftop, you can save up to 70% of the energy bill in the 20 years. And if you electrify all your energy vectors, like using a heat pump and adding it on top, you would save 100% of the 84,000 euros in 20 years, and you would have surplus energy to share with your energy community around you. But this is amazing, but really what the challenge lies is in finding the levers that allow for the coordination of all the assets, right? Because at the left hand, you can see how it would be a typical day in electric vehicles chargers. When people go out of home, they usually, when they get to home after work, they usually plug the car, and the car starts charging automatically. So there's a peak because everybody's doing this. If you can see at the right, this is also an uncontrolled. It shows how uncontrolled the charging is from everybody, and sometimes they meet at the same point. This is the EV chargers that are connected to our platform that are being part of the project before we suggested anything. As you can see on Friday, it's like the most used time for charging. We believe it's because everybody is preparing their car for the weekend. But you can also see almost every day and Wednesday where when people arrive home, you can see how they are charging. And also it's important to take into account that this EV chargers have also a solar installation, so you can see in the morning people are also charging when it's good for them economically, for the grid, and for the car because it's going to be charged. So while trying to find these levers for customers to allow us to manage their energy and be able to provide the comfort that it's needed, we started with the V2 Market project, 2 pilots. I'm going to present the one on the left, that it's 20 residential customers with a Smart EV charger. And our goal was to see what changes the behaviors in customers. Even though on the right, A and B, which is metropolitan area of Barcelona, which gets all the municipalities around Barcelona together in a single organization. They are testing the B2B case for fleets. And they are testing actually with V2G, the bidirectionality of the EV chargers. On our side, we're only testing V1G or smart charging because we believe, we have these assets available right now because customers already have installed these EV chargers, and they allow us to manage the start and stop and have all the data from the chargers. But we also think it's a good step to finding the different levers. If we manage to find what are the levers that customers need to let us manage their charging in V1G, we would already have half of the job done, and most probably the discharging would be even easier, because if we already have the trust from the customers, then they won't even notice if we discharge their car or we're just not charging. In the project, we have two exploitation pathways in electricity markets, which I related with the multi-layer offerings that Sandra was talking. On the top, we would have the individual layer where we have the day-ahead market, the intraday auctions, and intraday continuous market, which are quick in activation and operation. This is what we started with V1G. But we also did a pilot on the market with the market operator in Spain, where we connected our systems to their API. So we could test short-term and long-term markets, and able to see if we have flexibility and how would it work, which having a stage where customers already trust us with their charging of the batteries, we managed to get numbers like 220 euros per megawatt hour in gain, just for the availability or for providing the flexibility needed. So it's very interesting to check on the two layers, the individual and the system, but where we see now the potential in monetizing is in the system and local flexibility markets. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Alejandro. It's very, very, again, very interesting presentation. I'm very much looking for the Q&A section very soon. So now it's time for the last presentation. I'm presenting, just a small introduction. I mean, for me, it's easy because he's also my boss. So this is going to be an easy introduction. So Csaba Csiky, he is the chairman and senior partner at EnerSave Capital, which is a finance facilitator for sustainable assets based in Luxembourg, having plenty of experience, years and years of experience in the energy transition and also energy sector and green finance. So today he's going to present the servitization model and different type of, let's say, funding prospects in this space, and also a bit of the work that EnerSave has been doing in the V2M project. Csaba, if you want to say a few words more about yourself, happy to give you the floor now. Meanwhile, I'm just going to share the screen, and you let me know when you want me to move the slides left and right. Yeah.
Thank you, Alex. And it's quite funny that you're still referring to me as the boss, whilst you are the managing partner. I'm sitting in the chair. I'm sort of looking at the long-term things. You are the managing partner. You are running this firm, and you're running it very ably. As we can see from this, the organization of this wonderful webinar, which you have done with very, very much insight. As always, listening to Sandra is for me a mini MBA. Wonderful hearing her view and her take, which I've been following over the years. Alejandro and I, have been working together on the V2G proposition. So I know a lot of his views, and we just parted ways 24 hours ago in Brussels. So being an investment banker, I'm clearly having a very different approach, but of course building on whatever Sandra and Alejandro had to say. Alex, if you could just take the first slide. Now, just a quick introduction to the V2M market, which the EU has co-funded. Our task was to see the opportunities which V2G would provide to the marketplace with major players like Holaluz and AMB. I think all the necessary partners have been around the place, And as both Alejandro and Sandra have mentioned, regulation could be a bit faster, would have maybe helped the project, but I think that we have been able to come away with a lot of learnings. Now, Alex, if you could jump to the next one. One of the key learnings, which was led by Holaluz, was that the cost of the vehicle is a big issue for many people. Availability of subsidies or not availability changes the wish to take up EVs or not. And then there is clearly range anxiety. Everybody speaks about range anxiety, whilst the matter of the fact is that nobody drives more than 50 kilometers in a day. And for that, every battery will be suitable. Then there are other monetary factors which EVs are having a higher residual value loss than combustion engine powered ones. And particularly, I've seen lately that some of the car manufacturer or EV manufacturers are actually going to drastic measures to move EVs on their front court. Here in Luxembourg at the moment, Mercedes is offering up to 37% discounts on new EVs. I remember, and it's many years back, when my old boss wanted to buy a Mercedes upper range, and he went to Mercedes and they said to him, "Oh, monsieur, but that's not possible. You want to have an S-Class." And now they say, you will have to wait 1.5 years. And now they are giving us 37% discount. So there is clearly issues around subsidies, issues around moving EVs. Finance companies got it wrong. They are now increasing the leasing rates. And there is an amount out in Germany. Only the German market has mispriced EVs to the tune of 3 to 5 billion in residual values. This amount alone wipes out all the major finance companies of the major German car manufacturers. So it is a tricky number. And the issue is actually EVs are slow movers on the second-hand market. And it's all down to the battery. I was a few days ago saying that it was easy for us many years ago to say, okay, the car is in good shape because we checked the oil. But now we don't know what to check. It's a black box, which depends on software. And then used car salesmen are not the most trustworthy people. So it all comes down to human beings interacting with each other and reliability on what we see. If I could have the next slide, Alex, please. Now, the used car market, which is an enormous opportunity, because everybody, or that's not everybody, but a lot of people want to be part of the energy transition. Not everybody is having the amount ready in his wallet to buy a new Tesla. So many people will buy on the EV market, which in an interesting way for grid balancing is a very reliable group of people. As they go to an office, they sit there, they don't move the car. I fully agree with Sandra that the CEO of a bank who is having a very nice EV with the largest battery is useless for grid balancing, because for a yes or no, he jumps in his car, is being driven to a meeting, and suddenly a big battery is gone. And clearly for trading, that's essential. Now, all of the EV issues on the used car market are aggravated by anything which is out of warranty. Again, range anxiety, what can the battery do or what can it still do? At the same time, we understand from the Green Finance Institute's research that actually leasing companies and financing firms are willing to finance used EVs. We just need to come with new batteries. Big issue is cost of the battery, and particularly as EVs are slow movers, they are sitting on the front court of the sales organization and not generating any revenues. Alex, next slide, please. So what we are advocating is actually to separate not technically, but only legally, the battery from the vehicle. We all know why we want to have individual mobility. We're having our child seat, the flag of our favorite football club, and something which we forgot to deposit at the cleaners in our car. Therefore, we need to have our own box. But if legally one would be able to flip out the battery, that in turn would reduce the upfront cost of the vehicle. And if one would then be able to charge the client a fully charged kilometer, which would be lower than what his current, let's call it, petrol consumption is, then suddenly you've got a proposition which might be very attractive. There are many things on a subscription basis. If you want to have a massage function in your BMW 3 Series, well, you can subscribe for it. It is there, but if you want to subscribe it, you need to press a button. You need to pay Mr. BMW €17.45 per month, and suddenly you're very comfortable in your chair. In a funny way, we found out that Fiat, during the drying process of paint, is actually using the cars which they produce every day for grid balancing and getting paid for it. So people are taking advantage of the opportunities. So what we are advocating is to have an aggregator which would bring together all the batteries, bring as well the charging infrastructure into the same equation, because what we have learned during the V2M market process, that not only does one need to have a charging infrastructure, but it needs to be able to communicate. And I have seen in Poland personally, in a big bus company, that there are electric buses which were tendered in one tender, and then the charging infrastructure in another one. Guess what? They can't talk to each other. So these things need to be brought together. And finally, we are a big advocate for the aggregator not to look at the battery as in the car only, but already alluding to what Sandra was talking about, stationary storage, second life, third life storage, which is emergency in hospitals, in airports, wherever these kind of services are needed, where the battery only needs to be fully charged and then depleted once the grid would go dark for however long it takes, and sort of bridge the gap between when the grid goes off and the diesel generators start operating again. All of this generates revenues. Now, servitization is basically a sale of an output. We would be arguing that the battery has got an output in the car, and it is called a kilometer fully charged. Let's call it 12 cents. With that, energy can be met, and something for and the cost for the battery can be met. There are innumerable opportunities which are out in the market, Netflix, Spotify, even your software, you buy it on a monthly subscription. Mobility as a service, energy as a service, lighting as a service. It's all there. Other people are using it, so why not in the car sector? Thank you, Alex. So here we would basically separate, legally speaking, the battery from the car. The aggregator would monitor the state of the battery, would use it, and would reward the car owner or car user for constant plugging in, because I fully agree with Sandra, everything needs to be consumer-centered, and consumers need to be rewarded for good behavior. This in turn would reduce the purchase price, which would open a bigger pool of people, because affordability is key. One only pays for what one drives, and once the battery, which is monitored from a distance, starts to be, let's call it shaky, which is not a technical term, but it's what I use, one invites the vehicle user for lunch. During lunch at a service station, the battery is being swapped and the person drives off. 5 minutes later, the used battery is being put into a container and is being used for stationary grid services. So there are opportunities. One just needs to get the ducks in a row. And I think that the main benefit would be that it's a lower capex, larger pool of people can access it. The cost is predictable, which clients like. It is carefree. The client doesn't have to worry about anything. He has got an app. He can easily contract for more kilometers driven. And I would like to, at this moment, just go sideways for a second. There are two companies, Nest and Tadu, which are providing exactly the same model on the heating front. It is a self-learning tool. People trust it, that it learns within a week when you are at home, when you are not at home, and when you get into your place, your home is nice and toasty. So these kind of services exist, and people have taken advantage. So why not the battery as well? Finally, this would give to the DSO and the TSOs the ability to not go for grid enhancements, which are an enormous charge, and it takes a lot of time to implement. Can I have the next slide, please? Basically, in the servitization contract, the aggregator would own the battery, sells an output. These servitization contracts are an output on a unit basis, and it works in various industries. He's got the responsibility to maintain his equipment, which is then the flip side of that is that it gives comfort to the user. And actually, it is a very, very safe instrument, because if the service provider or the aggregator does not perform, the client doesn't need to pay. The other side is that if the client doesn't pay, the aggregator doesn't need to provide services. So for financiers, this is a very, very comfortable structure. Next slide, Alex, please. If you've got any further questions, please reach out to me. I'm happy to answer them. And if you would like to engage in this exciting trip, please be part of our journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Csaba. Very, very interesting, and lots of insights as well in terms of financing and how the structure would be, let's say, visualized, and what also are the barriers and also the benefits. So we have a few questions, and I'm going to start with Sandra. You have presented apparently one of your slides, the Tiko energy solution, has been very there are a few questions related to that particular slide and that particular company. First of all, the question would be like, where is the company located, and what are the local regulations put in place that the company was able to trade and participate into the market activities, and what would you think that are the regulatory frameworks, in a sense, that would be able to support the implementation of V2G technology? Clearly, there's a lot of questions there, so
yes.
you can take them one by one.
Yeah, probably I try to combine them a little bit.
Yeah.
So Tiko Energy Solutions was founded in Switzerland, and the first aggregated pools were run with heating equipment, so heat pumps, night storage heaters, direct heaters. Nowadays, the company is also involved in V2X projects. But mainly focusing currently in Switzerland and in specific other European countries, because it got sold to NG. So now it's fully integrated there, exactly. And I left some time ago. But how it was possible to participate in these different kind of markets was, on one side, to follow the existing regulation with the technology that is possible, and to adapt the technology in a way that it would fit into the regulation. So to give you an example, if you provide ancillary services, there's often a need in many countries that the device itself has to be measured. So you cannot use smart meter data, but you need to measure per device, and that's just given. So for sure, it's a pain, right, to put a measurement everywhere. Yeah. And I think this is also the great change that is currently happening through more and more assets being cloud connected, also having the possibility to leverage that much more, and to hopefully change regulation in that way. But at that point in time, there was the need for that piece of hardware. It has to follow certain kind of requirements. And then this was how it was, right? And either you participated as any other power station in the market, or you did not. Okay. Now, I think why I started off Beebop again, exactly in the same kind of area, is the change in the market. So changes in volatility of pricing. Intraday markets are getting all of a sudden open and more attractive. And there the regulation is much lower, right? There is a need for measurement, for settlement, but normally on the smart meter level. And even though we are far away from having the necessary coverage of smart meters, the necessary resolutions, etc., but at least we are getting there. So this is one piece. The second piece is as well that all the API connections, so the cloud-to-cloud connection of assets, makes the life much easier. And I think regulators are realizing that continuously, and are also adapting slowly to that process, so that hopefully at one point in time, also for ancillary services, there's no hardware necessary anymore. And this is why I think that a new independent aggregator like Beebop has a fair chance in the market to go in that direction.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and indeed, Beebop also was a very interesting, I think, solution. Also, the use of artificial intelligence and predictions, very, very important, especially because I didn't personally know that, but I learned via this EU initiative that in Spain you do need to put some guarantees, and those guarantees are lost should you not be able to provide whatever type of of energy you're supposed to, or you commit to. So clearly, it's very important to have different type of software and predictive mechanisms and artificial intelligence. From this point of view, I think it's coming at the right moment, at the right time, to penetrate this space and really provide us with enough data to make both parties feel very comfortable in the transaction. So so thank you very much for taking those questions. I'm going to also ask few questions to Alejandro that were, let's say, more targeted to this residential space and consumers. It's like, what are let's say, the primary concerns of consumers when we are talking about V2G. Even in your slide, we saw this first part and then V2G too. So it would be interesting to understand in terms of consumer awareness and acceptance, like where are we in Spain, and from your experience, where,
Yeah, sure. So there's very low consumer awareness about this type of things. Most of them would know is that you can try to shave the peaks and everything, but not about getting the energy out of their cars. And we have not said much about this because we are trying to see only with V1G what would happen. And we in the project we have encountered some technology issues, which I really believe that it's very interesting that Beebop actually has already integrated with a lot of these things. So Sandra, maybe we should talk.
yeah.
For sure.
That's good. Thank you. And we are doing a very manual pilot, which the preliminary conclusions are it cannot be manual, not for the customer, not for the one doing it. It must be automated and take into account all the limits that the customers have by them just saying it once or learning with their actual behaviors and not asking them and asking them to do stuff. So I believe this is what. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, you did. It was the uptake, about the consumers and how do they feel about V2G and whatever, so first or second layer. So yes, thank you for answering the question. I think
Thank you.
Very interesting points, and happy to see the evolution on the Spanish market. And now just the final question, because our time is coming up for Chaba, in terms of it's a two-folded question, but is there an interest, let's say, from investors in going to this space, considering that it's quite a new type of technology, is quite difficult technically to understand? I mean, we know that solar panels now, they are very widely accepted by investors and they're chasing this type of technology, but before it wasn't. So it needed a couple of years to kind of have a bit of root in the market, prove that the technology is working, and also for the investors to try to understand what the risks are that are coming with solar panel. In that case, in this case, we are talking about multiple moving pieces. Like, what do you think from your experience and from what you see into the market? Is there traction from investors to move into this space? And what's the comfort level? And do you also think that this can help in achieving, let's say, global climate goals, just because we're also talking about sustainable finance?
You want to have a short or a long answer? The short answer is yes, very much so. The long answer is that investors need to be educated. And I've particularly yesterday spoken to somebody who is moving into educating investors on power purchase agreements, and the long and the short of this is that if we are able to provide battery services, and batteries are nothing else than a utility, if you think about it. Utilities are something what pension funds love. They love the cash flow characteristics. They love the dependable dividend or coupon which are derived over 20 years. So this pocket of pension funds, which on the one side need to go ESG compliant, so the product itself is something which they are looking for, and if we can provide in their, what I would say, bites, and in their requirements, which is a quoted product, a minimum 5 to 10 million, which they can subscribe to, sort of speaking about issues of 250 million, which in itself might sound a big number, But you just need to aggregate a few of the batteries, and then suddenly you are there. Yes, the market is there, the market wants to have it, and it's for us to produce it.
Wonderful. And thank you very much for answering all the questions. Thank you very much for participating. It's been a very insightful webinar. As you see, you're also been recorded. So if you don't mind, I'm also going to reach out to you separately to get the confirmation that you feel comfortable in sharing the webinar also on different other social channels. So thank you very much for your participation, and wishing you a good rest of the week. Yeah. Thank you again. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.